Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to tie in what we're seeing play out here in macro markets into what we're seeing play out here in the crypto market, as we have just seen Ethereum finally break back to its range highs. And we're going to tie this into Bitcoin and how we are setting up for a final blow off top phase, which is the most exciting phase in the market, where we do see the Bitcoin dominance break down and we eventually get that alt season, just like we've seen here in 2021. And in today's video, we're going to cover why I believe we are on the final stages before actually seeing that play out, and that the most exciting time in crypto, when everyone comes to the market, when everyone's making money and things go absolutely parabolic, could just be around the corner. And day by day, we are inching ever so close to that. So if you're new to crypto or this is your first time through a market cycle, I'm going to do my best to show you the higher time frame perspective here and everything that I'm seeing and why this will be the most prosperous time coming up over the next 2 months for crypto. So lots to cover in today's video, guys. Let's jump into it. So firstly, I want to start with the upcoming Fed meeting in 36 days from now, where it looks like on the 17th of September, we are going to be seeing a rate cut. Now, over the last week, this percentage chance has been jumping between 80 to 90%, but it is looking like on the 17th of September, they are going to cut rates. So we're going to discuss what this means for the stock market and what this means for crypto. Now, if you caught last week's video, you'll see that 8 out of the last 9 times that we've seen the Fed actually cut rates, it has led to a crash in the Dow Jones. So if we have a look back to those last 3 times that happened, you can see that on the chart here where we have this red line, you can see this is the Fed funds rate, and that when they did cut the Fed funds rate back in 2019 leading into 2020, this was when we had COVID, and by the time that the Fed's fund rate had actually bottomed, we did see a market crash. Now you could say this was just to do with lockdowns and it has nothing to do with the Fed's fund rate and it's not tied to the Dow Jones. But if we go back to the time before that, which was right before the GFC in 2008, you can see that the same thing's set up here, where we had the Fed actually cut rates back in June of 2007, and then by the time that the Fed was done cutting rates and the rates had bottomed here, we had pretty much found the bottom in the Dow Jones. Then if we have a look back to the time before that, back in 2000, you can see that once the Fed started cutting rates here to the time that the rates had pretty much bottomed, we did see a significant pullback and crash in the Dow Jones. So the last 3 times from when the Fed had started cutting rates until the time they'd finished cutting rates, there was a serious pullback and correction across the Dow Jones. Now, if you're wondering how this is related to crypto, what we have here in the purple is Bitcoin's price chart. And you can see that the Dow Jones and Bitcoin are correlated here in the way that they react. And only recently, since the tariff scare, is when we've actually seen Bitcoin shoot to a new all-time high before actually seeing the Dow Jones do so. But over the course of the last 10 years, what we've seen is that every time Bitcoin's gone for a bull run, the Dow Jones has also been in a bull run, and that every time we've seen the Dow Jones sell off, we've also seen Bitcoin sell off in the same conditions. And that even if we have a look back to the 2017 bull run here for Bitcoin, you can see that once Bitcoin had come for its top, the Dow Jones from this point also topped and went in for a 20% correction, and during that time is when we've seen the 2017 to 2018 bear market for Bitcoin. So if the Dow Jones and Bitcoin are correlated here and do react similar, then if we're expecting an interest rate cut to actually cause a pullback or a crash here in the Dow Jones, it's also fair to say that we should expect a pullback and a crash to also occur in Bitcoin under those same market conditions. Now, if we tie this into the Bitcoin dominance, you can see that we have had an initial sell-off and crash in the Bitcoin dominance, and now what we're waiting for is a secondary breakdown for the Bitcoin dominance, just like the way things played out in 2021 here, where we've seen the initial crash in the Bitcoin dominance, a period of stalling out, and then that final crash, which ended up giving us our alt season in 2021. And I do believe structurally we have set up the exact same way we did in 2021, and things are aligning for us to go into a similar crash here for the Bitcoin dominance, which does mean phase 2 of alt season. And for those that are new here, this phase only lasts about 45 days. And just to correlate the two, we are 36 days away from the Fed cutting rates. Now, if we have a look at the US dollar, which is the DXY here, you can see that we have completed a 5-wave crashing structure on the DXY, and we are actually looking for the dollar to bottom. Now, if we have a look back to 2021, what you can see is that we did complete a very similar 5-wave crashing structure, and that when the dollar actually bottomed, what we've seen in the bounce here was a 5-wave move to the upside, followed by a pullback. And you can see in this purple box here, from the 1st of April to early May, this is when we had the alt season in 2021. And if we have a look back to the Bitcoin dominance, you can see that when dominance starts coming down here, this is the 1st of April, and this right here is early May when it finished. And this alt season that occurred during 2021 when the Bitcoin dominance crashed during this final period was all during this bottoming stage here for the US dollar. And right now, I do believe we have completed a very similar structure here, 5 waves to the downside. We're setting up for a final 5th wave push to the upside, and that in this final stage here, just like in 2021, what we could see is the dollar breakdown, as we see the Bitcoin dominance also break down like it did in 2021, all pointing to the fact that we are in those final stages of the market cycle. Now, something you also see in the final stages of the market cycle, which has just recently happened, is Ethereum actually catch up and push back to its range highs. And that even if we have a look back here to 2021, what you can see is that this is Ethereum in the blue and this is Bitcoin on the chart. And we can see that once Ethereum had actually made it back to its highs, back here you can see this is Ethereum's highs set back in 2018 in blue, and that once it actually made it back to its highs here in the blue, you can see that Bitcoin was going in for its final push before distributing, and that was essentially the top of the market. And during this final push for Bitcoin here was when we actually seen the majority of Ethereum's move actually happen. ETH went from about $1,300 here to $4,000 at the high, which on today's price chart is like Ethereum going from $4,000 to about that $10,000 to $12,000 level. And that all of this occurred for Ethereum in those final stages here of the market cycle for Bitcoin. And I do believe we are setting up for that final push on Bitcoin right now. Like touched on in yesterday's video, I do think Bitcoin will push to about 130,000 before having a small correction and then looking for that 5-wave parabolic push where Bitcoin can top out at around 150,000. Which, for those new here, this is the M2 money supply which we've charted out. So what we're seeing is the potential of interest rates being cut in 36 days, which tends to lead to a sell-off or a short-term crash in the Dow Jones, and Bitcoin is correlated to the Dow Jones, which points to a crash for Bitcoin. Meanwhile, we're seeing the dominance break down and act just like it did in 2021, while we're seeing the dollar also break down in these final stages just like it did in 2021, which then ended up leading into the alt season. And now what we've seen is Ethereum actually push back to its range highs, just like it did here back in 2021, while Bitcoin was in the stage where it went for its final push, which then was when Ethereum did the majority of its move. However, once we've seen Ethereum catch back up to its all-time high, this was that final stage for Bitcoin. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things play out over the next 36 days here for crypto. I don't think that when they cut rates, that'll be the top of the market cycle. I think there'll be a lot of short-term euphoria as people do believe that when they cut rates, that is bullish for the markets. But like we can clearly see here on the Dow Jones chart, nothing's bullish when we cut rates. The only time things get bullish is when rates actually bottom, and that during cutting cycles, it's actually quite bearish for a lot of markets. However, what we want to see in the final stage of a market cycle when we can see that alt season is for something like Bitcoin to be going in for its final push before distributing. What we want to see when Bitcoin goes in for this final push before distributing and actually setting its high is the alt season occur. And right now we are seeing everything set up for a potential alt season that I believe is right around the corner before we should see the Bitcoin dominance break down, the dollar eventually top out, and then going for this breakdown stage, just like it did back here in 2021 when we had the most recent alt season. And during this time is when we should see coins like XRP and a lot of the altcoin market actually go on and push between 200 to 400% higher here and complete full extensions from this mid-cycle correction that a lot of the altcoins have been going through. Which means that technically in the next 36 days, while we see the dollar sell off, while we see the Bitcoin dominance break down, what we should be seeing is XRP and a lot of the altcoin market actually finish their bull run. And that when that time comes, if we do see prices higher, no matter how bullish the narrative is, and no matter how many people are telling us prices are going to go higher and we're going to see $20, $50, $100 XRP, that most likely this is the top that we're looking for, and that everything we're seeing right now is perfectly normal and everything we've actually seen in the past. And we're seeing all of that happen in not just crypto, but broader markets. So guys, the next 36 days are going to be really interesting. It's going to be an exciting time. I think this is when all of the money is made in crypto. And right now, seeing Ethereum shoot back to its range highs is just another indicator in what we want to see before we can actually see expansion in the rest of the crypto market. And even if we have a look at total 2 here, we can see it is just edging before it's ready to break out. And I think that when we see this breakout and we do see the Bitcoin dominance breakdown at the same time, and that 30 to 40 day timer essentially begins for the alt season that I believe is about to happen. And even just recently, in only the last couple of weeks, we've actually seen the M2 Global Liquidity Index actually top out here in those regions that we're looking for, which is yet again just another indicator pointing to the top being almost in and that the most exciting blow-off stage is about to commence. So guys, we covered a lot in today's video. I hope you all learned something new and how we're having a look at things from higher timeframes here and tying in a lot of indicators to determine what part of the market cycle we're in, and that everything that we're looking at right now actually points to an alt season just being around around the corner. And if you're new to crypto, this is your first time going through a bull run, I highly suggest that this is when you pay the most attention to the market, and that if we do see things set up like they did on the left side here in 2021, and we do see this Bitcoin dominance break down, expect everyone to be talking about crypto, expect the news events to be crazy, but keep it in the back of your mind that these things don't last long and that they eventually do top out, and that once we see all of this happen, no matter what the narrative is at the bottom or at the top, we must always take profits and be happy with the money that's been made during this cycle. And that if you're new to all this, I'll be here making videos guiding everyone through how this plays out along the way, touching on exactly where I plan to take profits and my exit strategies over the coming weeks and months. So if you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like down below. If you enjoy this style of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about anything we've discussed in today's video, I know we covered a lot, feel free to drop it down below in the comments section, and I'll see you guys in the next video.